So today I want to do a quick video about growing carrots for a harvest in the kind of hungry gap period. So late April, May, early June time. And there's a few techniques to doing it. Now the vast majority of carrots that I'll grow direct in the ground. And I actually leave them in the ground. Plane going over, so helicopter going over. I leave them in the ground until I want to harvest them, and I find that gives me the freshest, crunchiest, sweetest carrots so much better than if I had harvested the carrots and just kind of put them in sand or compost or something like that, because they're still alive, and obviously eating something that's really still alive and still growing, and also something that's had a decent frost on it, it really sweetens it up no end. So in order to do that though, I do a few things. Not everybody will need to do these things, but I like to do it this way. First off is that by about the end of November, there's no carrot fly around. So I take the covers off them. But I also like to snip off about this sort of high, all the tops, so that all I've got is the carrot in the ground and a couple of inches of top. That top will then start to regrow. The reason I snip all the top off is because I find that in the depths of winter, all that carrot top growth, it all dies down and it all flops over, and you just get a breeding ground for slugs and snails underneath there. And it's also just a horrible mouldy mess, and it makes it hard to assess how many carrots you've got, how big they are, and therefore how many you can pick each week and not run out by the time your new carrots are ready. So yeah, I just snip them off. As I say, they all just start to regrow then, but of course they're regrowing with nice, vibrant new growth, and that just keeps the carrots, as I say, super fresh and crisp. So the other thing that I like to do is I like to just put a cold frame top over them. And so that is one of the reasons why for my winter and spring carrots, I do grow them in a bed that's got a sloping side on it, so I can just pop a cold frame top on. The reason that I do that is it makes it a lot easier to harvest them if the ground is frosted, and it stops them getting too much rain, because too much rain and carrots don't really go well together. They do tend to split. And the third reason is that the ground kind of dries out around them and the surface dries out, but obviously deep down there's plenty of water. And that just reduces again the number of pests, snail and slug pests that I'm getting. So I just get nicer quality carrots, and I get fantastic tasting carrots, and I get easy harvested carrots. So the other trick that I do is I like to harvest alternate rows. And that means that when it comes to sort of February time, I've got all these spaces in my carrot bed that I can plant some other crop in, something like Asian greens or spinach or something like that. And they will be harvested by the time the carrots are finished in sort of mid to late April. So that's another nice little trick, and that is one of the benefits, of course, of growing them in a cold frame. You get the ability to get that other crop to maturity. You could also grow radishes and turnips and a few other things like that. So there's lots of opportunities really to get, to be able to use that February to April harvest window. Lettuces as well is another great example. So I'm leaving those carrots in the ground, as I say, all the way through until sometime in April, when I might be planting, say, onions or something like that, for example. And so I need to take them out. So what I'll have a few left, ideally. I will take those last few, probably enough for about a month's supply. I'll take those out towards the middle of April, put those into moist compost, and just harvest from the compost just for that last month. And I find that they never go to seed like that. And that means the bed's cleared, as I said, for onions. So what am I going to do then between the early May, when the ones in the compost have run out, and when my in the ground sown in March, carrots are ready sort of in July sort of time. I need a way to get a small number, just a month or so, 6 weeks or 8 weeks sort of supply of carrots. And the way I'm doing that is by sowing some now. I'll do 2 batches. I'm going to do Napoli, which is a great overwintering carrot. I'm going to do that in October, end of October, today actually, which is the 25th of October. And then I'll do another batch of Marion, and I'll do those about the 5th of November or thereabouts. I mean, it doesn't really matter exactly, but early November. Now, those carrots will not grow very much. There's not much light. There's just enough heat to germinate those carrots, although it will take a few weeks to germinate. And I'll do those in containers so I can keep them in the polytunnel, but they don't like to be in the polytunnel after about mid-April time, because it's too warm in the polytunnel then, and I find that they get downy mildew on the leaves. So by then, sometime in April, I'll move them outside and let them grow on top of my IBC tanks, and they're really high, and so ideally they're out of the way of carrot fly, because carrot fly is starting to get out and about in the middle of April time. They will come to maturity, as I said, in early summer, just when I'm running out of the ones in the compost. So I'll just take you through now the way that I sow those super early carrots in containers. And this is a good technique in general for sowing carrots in containers at any time of year, but if you can sow them in the ground, so much better. So let's start off with the container. I recommend something like a 30-litre pot or one of the big troughs that that I'm going to be using, and about 12 inches deep, ideally, to give you at least a 9-inch carrot, which it would be kind of ideal, I think, for an early carrot, although some of them are going to be a bit smaller than that. So the bottom, make sure there's loads of holes drilled in your container, because carrots like it wet, but obviously they don't like to be sitting in water. So well-drained soil, but as I say, holes. Second thing, I like to put like 2 inches of homemade compost at the bottom of these containers, and that just gives a kind of high nutrient base at the bottom that the carrot roots can get down to and feed from. If you don't do that, then it's worth just mixing in a handful of bloodfish and bone, maybe half a handful actually, of bloodfish and bone into a 30-litre pot, and that'll just give them a bit of feed. So second thing, sometimes you could just use ordinary compost, a nice fine compost, something like a seed compost or spent potato compost or something like that. But today I'm going to use just topsoil that I happened to get from the garden centre because it was on offer, and I thought, yeah, that'd be really nice. Basically all my carrots basically grow in nice sandy soil, and that's what effectively topsoil is that you get from a garden centre. So yeah, so I fill about to the bottom 2 inches are homemade compost, then sort of 8 inches of topsoil, and then just like a 1 centimetre layer on top of, I'm putting spent potato compost on top, and that is just because that is weed free. So my spent potato compost was previously just a multi-purpose compost. It's sterile, there's no weed seeds in it, and I just really like that for carrots. I don't like to be faffing around weeding around them, especially when they're really little. So once you've filled your container, give it a nice press down with your hands, not too firm, but firm enough that it's not going to sink substantially over time, and then give it a good water. That is probably the only really good water you're going to need to give it over winter. You might have to give a little bit of surface watering, but you don't really want to be doing too much, because you're going to get algae growth if you do too much watering in a polytunnel over winter. So yeah, give it a good water, and then somehow you've got to lay out your carrot seeds. Now you could just do it equidistant. And what I've just done this year is I've just pressed a seedling tray into the compost, and the ridges at the bottom of the seedling tray, a drip tray, give you a nice kind of grid to sow your carrots into. So I found that was just really simple this year. And I'm giving mine about 1.5 inches in between each carrot. Now you could oversow, and I've certainly previously kind of oversowed like twice as many carrots as I need and then thinned out. This year I just don't actually have enough Napoli carrot seeds to do that, so I've sowed my desired density and just fingers crossed that I get good germination. But I've got loads of carrots. I'm sowing loads of carrots this year, so I don't think it's going to be an issue for me. And of course, the nice thing is, if or the way to think about it is, if you don't get good germination, you just get, you can just resow. You've still got time to resow into about the middle of November, but if you get reasonable germination, you'll just get bigger carrots. And if you get really good germination, you get slightly smaller carrots. So it's not kind of a disaster, really. Carrots, respond quite well to the amount of space that they're given, and that's the nice thing about them, So you can control the size of the carrots by just the planting density that you use. Although if you do kind of oversow too much, you will get lots of little tiny carrots, and they will tend to grow together and merge and look like they're forked, but they've actually just merged together. So I think I put something like 40 carrots, 30, I think it worked out something like 37, but roughly 40 carrots in each of those containers. And then on top, as I say, I just put 1 centimetre of spent potato compost, and it's a nice peaty compost, so it's quite nice and water retentive, and I'll give that a nice water, because carrots really do the seeds need to be kept moist all the way through the germination phase, which can be 2 to 3 weeks at this time of year. So you do need to make sure that they're moist for that whole period of time. 2 to 3 weeks time, as I say, you'll start to see those carrots coming up. If you don't see them coming up, maybe consider sowing a few more in the gaps. And I will, as I say, do another batch about 5th of November. As I said earlier in the video, they won't grow very much, because by the time they're germinating in November, light levels are really dropping, and carrots don't grow very fast as a rule anyway. So there'll be tiny little seedlings, maybe this sort of size, all the way through winter. And they won't really start growing much beyond that until late February, early spring. But then they'll really get going, because they've put good roots down. They're nice, well-established little plants. They're really ready to go. And that's the point of doing it now, is that you've got really well-established plants as soon as there's enough light level for them to grow. The alternative, of course, is to sow them in, say, January, early February, but then you've got tiny little seedlings at the time when there's enough light level for them to grow. And so you tend to be 3 to 4 weeks later. And if you think about it, I've sown about a month's worth of carrots now, with the view that I'll sow some more in sort of, maybe March time, beginning of March, and those will be ready about a month later. And then I'll sow some more in April in the ground, and then those will be ready about a month later. But that batch I'll just I'll sow all of them, all the ones I'm going to eat in summer, and I'll just harvest those, and they'll just get gradually bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as I harvest them, until they're really giant big carrots in sort of September time, when I'm finishing harvesting that bed. But as I say, I don't mind that. I don't really get why people are slightly focused on this idea of sowing a two weeks worth of carrots, and then another 2 weeks worth of carrots, and then another 2 weeks worth of carrots. I think that makes sense when you're doing these early ones, but it doesn't really make sense, I don't think, when you're just doing your summer carrots and your autumn carrots and your winter carrots. I think it's, it's just 3 sowings basically, and they just get progressively bigger. They don't taste any worse, they don't taste any better, but they're just bigger, and big carrots, just nice and efficient, loads of carrots to eat, just as sweet, just as crunchy. So yeah, I'm pretty happy about that. The only thing I would say is that if you're just eating them fresh in salads or something like that, I do tend to prefer a slightly smaller carrot, but that is just because I can't get through a carrot that's, you know, like 12 inches long and, you know, 1.5 inches wide or something in a salad. So that, I think, is pretty much it. Just remember that you will start to have carrot fly around in April, so you will either have to grow them high or you'll have to grow them under mesh, unless you're lucky enough not to have a problem with carrot fly. I tend to always grow everything apart from this early batch which are on the IBC tanks under mesh, fine mesh, because we just get a lot of carrot fly around here. I think most allotment sites do. So I do have a comprehensive ebook all about growing carrots, and you can find a link to that down below. It's got loads more videos, it's got all the different timings and all the different growing techniques and things like that, and all the things that I've talked about in this video are explained in much more detail with specific videos on each of the topics as well. So my name's Steve, this is the Seaside Kitchen Garden and Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon.